Jason, I'll let you start off your list.
All right, Sam, thanks. And first off, I want to say I was pleasantly surprised and I really enjoyed the movie, and I know you did too. And
Definitely.
it was really funny to hear people kind of ripping it apart, it seemed, before anyone had a chance to see it. And obviously, the numbers aren't lying. People have enjoyed it. And it's a nice, strong start to the shared universe of the DC universe. I like that.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so my first thing, and these are in no order for me, they're all
Okay.
things I equally liked about the movie. As you know, I've mentioned several times on our show that the Nolan films are really like high up there for me, not just as
Hmm.
superhero films, but just films in general. And I
Right.
was really worried about Ben Affleck filling the role of Batman as well as Christian Bale and how they approached it. But they did a really good job. I would say they didn't really go against anything in those movies. Things could have happened in those films that could have worked if they wanted to make it a shared continuity thing, but they made a fresh start. But it worked
Hmm.
really well. The tone was similar in a lot of ways, even having
Hmm.
the same composer like Hans Zimmer. And I
Yeah.
thought that Ben Affleck did a great job as Batman and Bruce Wayne. Probably a really good Bruce Wayne, maybe one of the better performances we've seen. And I
Hmm.
liked Alfred as well. Jeremy Irons was a great choice.
Yeah. So going into one of my top five favorites, it's going to go right along with that. I loved the Batman action scenes
Yeah.
when Batman is brawling and fighting. Some of those just really had me amazed and thinking to myself, like, this is the best Batman action scene I've seen
Yeah,
on the screen.
totally.
Nothing against the other movies because the other movies have great stuff going for it, but
Yeah.
in terms of some of those action stuff, like especially, so spoiler alert, we might get into some spoilers here,
Oh,
but
yeah.
the Martha rescue scene, amazing.
Yeah, totally. It reminded me
The,
of like Arkham Asylum, like, and that's high
yeah.
praise because that won Video Game of the Year for its action scenes and how well it conveyed what a Batman would be like fighting in the comic book style.
Yeah, and the other thing I liked with Batman was that they had him doing some real detective work. I mean, a lot of the
Hmm.
movie, he's following these leads, he's going in, he's getting the information, he's putting the pieces together. So I like that too.
Yeah, that bodes well too for if they make Batman standalone films. We want to see more of that kind of thing. More detective work is always welcome.
Very sure. All right, what's next up for you?
Next up is a shared one for us. So next up for me is Wonder Woman. Really pleasantly surprised with how great Gal Gadot was in the role. When I put the pieces together from what we saw in the trailer, there wasn't tons of extra scenes she was in. They were kind of just extended scenes of her at the party and behind the scenes, and then finally as Wonder Woman in the big battle at the end. But she had big shoes to fill with Linda Carter. Was such an icon of this character and really the most recognizable person to ever play Wonder Woman.
Right.
And she did a great job. She pulled off the action scenes. She looked good in the costume. And, Wonder Woman's got to be like a real striking woman. And she looked really gorgeous in those scenes with Bruce at the party. And I really thought she delivered and made it believable for me. After she was on screen for about 30 seconds, I'm like, well, she's pulling it off. She's the new Wonder Woman. And that's what we need.
Hmm. Yeah, so I have Wonder Woman on my list as well. For me, with Wonder Woman, I liked hearing about her decision to come back to help humanity and got me really curious about this 100 years since World War One. Like, what was it that turned her away from mankind?
Yeah.
So that drew me in, makes me want to see the Wonder Woman film.
Yeah.
And then to me, when Wonder Woman drops into the fight with Doomsday, that was like probably the most exhilarating moment of the movie.
Yeah, it was great.
When she comes in, and then she had some really good fight choreography in that battle. So for me, Wonder Woman was a very strong point as well.
Yeah, it was great. They did a good job of balancing all that action there because it had the potential to be too much going on at once, but they really did a good job with it.
Yep. All right, next up for you.
Next up for me is something that was a big surprise for me, and I'm glad it wasn't spoiled. When we were hearing our behind the scenes things in the last couple of years, and that was the Martha connection. Never really put it together through all my years of reading Batman and Superman comics that Batman and Clark Kent, their parents, the mother was both named Martha, and they really did a cool point with that in the movie where Batman came to that realization when he was almost going to finish Superman off, and Lois mentions, don't, what about Martha? We have to save Martha. And he was like, what did you say? I love that. It
Hmm.
worked really well because when a character like Batman and Superman have been around so long, when you can figure out something different to do with it from a writer's point of view and connect them somehow even more and really just gives it like a human element to the story with such bombastic action going on. I thought that was really poignant and it worked really well for the movie.
Yeah, so I liked the Martha scene as well. And just before the movie came out, I went to Barnes and Noble and they had a trivia night for Batman and Superman.
Mm.
And one of the trivia questions was, Clark Kent's parents' names. So I put down Jonathan and Martha Kent. Then they had a question later about Bruce Wayne's parents' names. And like as I was writing it down, I was like, oh, Martha Wayne. And
Yeah.
and I had read all these stories and I never actually thought about it until that trivia night that they had the same name.
Yeah. Hey.
And then lo and behold, like there it plays into it. And I liked that moment as well as the thing that it triggered Bruce to kind of put it all together and to realize that the issue was with himself and to realize that he was being played a little bit and to pull himself out of his funk that he had been in for 2 years.
Totally, yeah. And any other way to connect the characters, as I said, too, made it, really a stronger kind of how they could form a bit of a friendship, as the movie went on in those scenes, and it was cool.
Yeah. So for me, my next up for a favorite thing is I liked that they had a definitive winner in the fight. I probably would have bet money that there was going to be some sort of a draw or something like that, just so that each fan base could sort of hold their head up high. But I'm glad that they went for an actual victor. So Batman wins the fight. In terms of just the pure fight, Batman wins it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a Superman fan, but I was okay with it because I was glad that they took a stand as a creative team. And also, I think it was okay because once Doomsday comes around, Batman basically just hides and runs away.
Yeah, he didn't
and
have
when
a lot to
Doomsday's
do
there, you need Superman and Wonder Woman to come in. So to me, it kind of like Superman got his mojo back once, it was clear. So it's kind of like, yeah, Batman, you can have your little fight and you need to realize, you need to learn your lesson and kind of come to your senses. Superman is the one that you're going to want by your side if Doomsday's coming.
Well, totally. And the thing is that Batman, the reason he won the fight is because he's the master strategist and he planned for this fight for probably over a year. If he had the, chance to know Doomsday and what the character was and maybe a weakness, maybe he'd have a chance then. But they played that well with Superman. There's a lot of cool surprises in there. The sonics going on. I like ththose kryptonite kind of gas bombs and stuff. It was really cool, and I really enjoyed the scene a lot.
Yeah, I liked the fight scene as well. I liked how, it had some good action in it, but more so it felt like a chess match. Like, it felt like, okay, Bruce had this, is Superman going to overcome it? Now the next thing, now the next thing. So I liked that feel. I don't really remember any other fight that had that sort of a feel to it, like a multi-stage chess game.
Yeah, it was really well done, and it's funny, like, we knew it was coming for a long time. I've heard some people complain online that, it took so long for it to happen, but that's what I've been saying for the last couple of years. I'm like, I wanted it to build up. So when they finally fought, it was a big deal because we'd seen so many shots from the trailers over and over again. I wanted it to really build up and be a nice surprise when we got different things going on, and I felt it really was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to take one here now.
Sure.
So one thing that I really liked was I haven't been able to put my finger on it exactly, but I got this feeling of a comic book aesthetic, which I think was coming primarily from Zack Snyder.
Sure.
But there would be some of these images where I'm like, oh, that's like a splash page. And the camera would kind of sit on it for a little bit longer than a normal movie. And I feel like they're treating it like a comic book reader does when they get to certain panels. And the story is flowing, but when you get to certain panels, you just stop and you take them all in.
Yeah.
And I felt like this movie did that. There'd be some scenes where they would go to a slow motion and they would let you take in the scene when really they could have just had it happen and then go on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. Or there were some big, like, stunning shots and I'm like, oh, wow, that's like a double page spread.
Yeah.
So there was just things like that I felt like it was... I could tell that it was inspired by a comic book and that it was a comic book fan who was making this movie.
Totally. And, that's one of the reasons they picked Zack Snyder. Like, he has his strong points and his weak points as a director. He's made some really good movies. He's made some clunkers. But when you're going for something with this kind of level of action and wanting it to be, it's the first time Batman and Superman are meeting and it's a big fight, he's a good choice for it. And he had a lot of great shots, as you mentioned, for those scenes, I would say.
Yeah. What's another thing you had?
The next one for me is the glimpses of the DC heroes that we got. So I kind of thought, how are they going to do that over these last couple of years and make it so it's not just thrown in at the end, like Cyborg jumping in to help them or something. Mm-hmm. And they did a cool thing with them kind of finding this behind the scenes footage and surveillance camera footage and basically a file that Lex had and Wonder Woman was trying to get it and Bruce was trying to get it. And then they went through it and there was really cool ways of showing Aquaman for the first time, Cyborg being built, and the Flash kind of stopping a robbery just at a convenience store. Thought it was really well done, and it works just enough to give you a glimpse and a tease to make you interested for what's going to come next. Wasn't a huge fan of that little Flash other costume point you saw where it seemed like he was coming from the future, but it might not be the final costume, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it might be a time travel costume instead
Yeah.
of his normal costume. But for me, I was immediately thinking Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I had to kind of
Yes.
explain that to some of the other people because they're like, I have no idea what that was.
Well, that's it. Yeah, for people that read the comics, that we'll get into that on another episode probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, that came out of nowhere, didn't it?
Right. But for me, it got me in touch. And yeah, I liked the Justice League stuff too. I thought it made sense that given Lex's character arc and what he was doing, I think it made sense that Lex was trying to gather this information on all of them. So I thought that was a nice way to get into it. But I also, like you said, I like it that the other Justice Leaguers didn't come into the fight on Doomsday because I think that would have watered down Wonder Woman's arrival. Like, I think it was good that it was Wonder Woman who came in to join the fight, not four people that came in to join the fight.
And it was actually cool too that Wonder Woman was the one, even though she was just sitting at a computer figuring this stuff out, gave her something else to do in the movie as well, which was kind of be the one to see all this footage of the different characters. I thought it was cool.
Yep. All right, and so for me, my last one is I liked the Superman character arc a lot. He didn't have a lot of dialogue again, but that goes with his character kind of even back to Man of Steel. But for me, with the Superman character arc, it's all about empathizing with him.
Yeah.
And he is trying to do the right thing, but then there ends up being these negative repercussions or these unintended consequences. And he's like, I was just trying to save Lois, or I was just trying to help this thing. I didn't intend for this negative stuff after that. And to me, it even goes back to Man of Steel. Like, he was trying to save the world, and then he gets all this flack for it, including from fans in the real world are giving him flack. And it's like, hey, he was trying his best, and he saved the world. Like, give him some credit for that.
Yeah.
But for me, like, when he's standing in the Capitol, and, you know, he's basically feeling like, what am I supposed to do? There's always these negative things, and people are reacting negatively to me when I'm trying to do the right thing. So Superman says, I'm going to submit myself, and I'm going to come down, and I'm going to stand before this hearing, and I'm going to try this new approach to just explain myself of what's going on. And then it's so heartbreaking that when he tries to do that, it's this big tragedy, and now, of course, he's going to get blamed, or it's all going to be attached to him, and he's just standing in that fire, and I just really empathize with him. And so then for me, I actually have it as one of my favorite things that they killed Superman at the end of this movie. Even though if you go back to our video from like a year ago, I said I did not want them to kill Superman.
Yeah.
Once I saw the story that they were telling, I got it. I'm like, okay, they did need to kill Superman because that's the ultimate sacrifice, so you can't second guess him for literally giving his life to save, you know, the city and the world. And I think it caused humanity to appreciate Superman and to be like, you know what? Maybe we should stop fighting and nitpicking all the stuff he does, and maybe we should have just appreciated that we had Superman.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, like, to me, we'll talk about it on another episode probably, but I felt maybe in the whole grand scheme of things, it may have been too soon to do that with the character, but it worked well within the framework of this movie. And it definitely, that's what worked well in the comic when they killed Superman off, is that you don't realize what you've got till it's gone. And it worked really well for the sales of the comic even as well. For Superman's arc, what I really enjoyed too is there was a lot more interaction with the characters and the Daily Planet stuff, and a lot more Clark Kent stuff, and especially with Lois, and that worked really well because I felt that was the one aspect of Man of Steel that I missed. And then my final thought was kind of ties in with that, is that the big ideas of superheroes being held accountable for their actions in this film was such a huge theme, and it really worked well. It was a nice kind of commentary on violence in the world, you know, post 9/11, and having kind of, you know, big discussions about this violence, if there really were superheroes, who's accountable for the damage that it does, not just to cities, but to people and ideals. And I thought for a big action movie kind of slugfest, it was cool that they had that in there. It brought a different level to the film, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and since watching it, I've gotten really deep into the themes, some of which you're touching on there, and that's it's making me actually like the movie more and more as I think about it and talk to other people about it. So we will have to do some more videos on it in the future.
Yeah, we totally will. I enjoyed it, and I'll definitely be seeing it again at some point.